For the first time ever, robotaxis are finally real. Tesla, Waymo, Zoox, and a million other of these companies are currently competing to build the car of the future. But the problem is that they disagree on literally every decision it takes to get there. Waymo thinks the solution is $100,000 worth of lasers. Tesla thinks that's stupid and all you need are cameras. Meanwhile, Zoox is out here making this weird box thing with no steering wheel. But even though all of these companies have the exact same end goal, somehow they all have completely different approaches on actually getting there. From how self-driving cars should be made, to how they should be operated, to even how they should see and react to the world around them. The truth is, we've been promised this perfect future of autonomous cars for many years now, and it's been a bit of a struggle to get there. But for the first time ever, we are actually starting to get close to that future that was promised. There are a few companies out there today that are operating real robotaxis in real cities, which is why I drove all the way out to San Francisco and Las Vegas so I could compare every robotaxi currently operating in America and figure out which one is going to win the race to true level 5 autonomy. All right, I'm currently on a 350-mile drive from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and so far I have not touched the steering wheel once. But this is just one level of autonomy. There are 5 different levels of autonomy, ranging from basic cruise control to a car so good at driving itself that it doesn't even need a steering wheel. The car I'm currently in right now is classified as a level 2 autonomous vehicle, meaning it can drive, but I have to be ready to take over at any moment. The robotaxis I'm testing today are all level 4, which means they can fully drive themselves, but only in a specific area. The goal, though, is level 5, which would mean the car can drive itself anywhere at any time with no human intervention ever. Right now, no one is at level 5, not even close, but every company has their own plan on getting there. Let's start off with a robotaxi you're probably most familiar with already. This is a Waymo, and as you can see, they essentially just stuck on a ton of high-end sensors to a Jaguar I-Pace. These sensors are called LiDAR, and they let the car map out its surroundings with an insane amount of accuracy, which might seem necessary for self-driving to work, but this is the Tesla robotaxi, and as you can see, there are no visible sensors anywhere on the car. This is the first of 3 major disagreements by robotaxi companies. Most of these companies have absolutely packed their cars full of LiDAR. I mean, Waymo has literally turned every open spot available into some sort of LiDAR corner type thing. This idea theoretically makes sense, right? The more data the car has on the road, the better it can see, the better it can drive, etc. But Tesla has a few problems with this approach. First of all, it's crazy expensive. Plus, it makes robotaxis a lot more difficult to manufacture, to calibrate, and to repair if something goes wrong. But more importantly, Tesla actually thinks all of this extra info that LiDAR provides could make the car more dangerous sometimes, which makes no sense at all, but let me try and explain this. If LiDAR and cameras disagree on something, even if they see something slightly differently, the car won't always know which sensor to trust, and that could cause the car to act indecisive. So if one sensor sees something that the other doesn't, the car might swerve out of the way to avoid nothing, or even worse, it could trust the wrong sensor and fail to avoid a real obstacle. Right now, the entire robotaxi industry is kind of at war on whether or not to use LiDAR, and currently it is everyone versus Tesla.
It's my instinct that in the near term, it's going to be very difficult to build a camera-only product.
Tesla will face a real-time test of whether its vision-only system is fundamentally flawed in low visibility conditions.
Do you see a world in which you don't need LiDAR?
Not yet.
Not yet.
So while every other company is relying on LiDAR for vision, Tesla is making this bet that if they just get a crazy amount of training data, they can make self-driving work with only cameras. Alright, so which approach is better? Well, we stress tested the Tesla Robotaxi and Google's Waymo throughout San Francisco to do a direct head-to-head comparison, and the results were interesting. We booked rides through some of the most chaotic streets in San Francisco. We even tried calling both cars to this super random dead-end alley. And honestly, both did great. Both of them felt safe and both of them got us to our destination on time, but the actual experience of being in the cars felt very different. If we compare the screens on the inside, you can see that the LiDAR sensors on the Waymo do give it a lot more info to work with, especially at an intersection. The Tesla visualization kind of moves around a bit, but everything on the Waymo screen is just locked in place. I mean, look at how many individual people it can see here. It's insane. Seeing this, you would think that the Waymo had the better ride, but Honestly, it was actually the opposite. At the end of all the rides, I asked my cameraman, who's not a tech nerd, he's a normal person, which one was smoother, and he immediately said the Tesla. I know it's kind of dumb to say that a literal robot drives like a robot, but the Waymo honestly has the driving personality of a Roomba. It just feels robotic. It feels like it's overthinking everything. Every time we got to an intersection where there was more going on, the path planner on the Waymo would start jumping around and getting all indecisive. There was even this one time when we got to a red light and it kind of pulled off to the side of the road, which felt very unnecessary. Waymo is clearly optimizing for maximum safety here, which I appreciate, but it ends up making the drive feel more like a student driver. On the other hand, the Tesla has way less information to work with. It's basically just guessing. It's reconstructing the world from 8 camera feeds, and then it processes that info the same exact way that your brain does. But that's why I think it feels more human. Tesla is essentially making a bet here that what's going to get them to level 5 autonomy isn't making their cars see more on the road, it's making them smarter. Waymo has LiDAR, but Tesla has years of footage from millions of their cars that drive around the real world every day. And all of that training data is what they think will give their cars the decision-making capabilities to be considered level 5. Okay, I have to pause the video here because there is one major caveat to the Tesla that I haven't mentioned yet, which is that there is a driver in the front seat, the driver's seat of this supposedly self-driving car. Tesla calls these safety monitors, and in fairness to Tesla, they're not actually supposed to do anything. They're just there to take over if something goes horribly wrong. But it's still kind of hard to ignore because it means their system right now isn't that much different from the level 2 system that I use to drive to San Francisco. Tesla says that these safety monitors will be removed next year. And if you believe that, then you'll also believe that the Cybercab is coming in 2026. Which is a great transition to our next major disagreement, which is the hardware. Most of these companies can be split into one of 2 categories. Companies that are adding hardware to existing cars to make them robotaxis, or companies that already have the cars to sell you and now just need to build the software that makes them autonomous. But there is a third and more interesting category, which is companies that choose to build cars from the ground up for the sole purpose of being autonomous. Last year, Tesla announced the Cybercab, which is their ground up custom built robotaxi to replace the Model Y that we rode in earlier. But there is one other company that is currently going all in on building a robotaxi from the ground up. And to see it, we've got to go to Vegas. You may notice that we're not in Vegas right now. And this is where we get to the tragedy that is Zoox. And it's not a tragedy because it's a bad product. It's a tragedy for more personal reasons. We drove to Vegas 2 separate times to film this thing. That is 18 hours of driving, and it was a disaster. The first time we went, the app was down for a few hours when we got there, and by the time that was back up and we figured out their stupidly confusing app, it was already dark out and the footage looked terrible. So I said, you know what? Let's run it back. Let's do this again now that we know what we're doing. So we woke up extra early next weekend and we drove all the way back to Las Vegas. And guess what? This time it was down all weekend due to an F1 race that was apparently happening in the middle of the city, which also did not show up on the app at all until we had already arrived in Vegas. So all this to say, I don't actually have a good shot of me in the Zoox, but I did get to ride in it, and it is pretty cool. It really is the closest thing to that sci-fi future we were promised, where there's no steering wheel and you actually get to face the other passengers. The seats are pretty uncomfortable, and it drives pretty slow. But other than that, it is a pretty nice environment to be in. You got the Rolls-Royce lights, phone chargers, free music. As much as I want to hate them, it is kind of a vibe. But the coolest thing about the Zoox is that since they designed it specifically to be a robotaxi, they can do cool things that other car makers can't, like making it so that there's no front or back. After the car drops you off, it can drive in either direction, which makes it a lot faster to find new riders instead of having to circle the block or something like you'd have to do in a traditional car. It is genuinely very cool to be in a car that you can tell was designed to be a robotaxi, but they also clearly have a lot of work left to do on actually making it real. If I had to give a ranking purely based on how comfortable the rides were, I would go Tesla first, Waymo second, Zoox third, And then in absolute last place, dead last, would be the one Uber I had to call at the end of the night. That was just maybe the worst car ride of my entire life. It was actually terrible. It was like you learned to drive from GTA or something. But there is one last difference to all of these companies, and that is the ownership model. And I think this is where Tesla really starts to pull ahead. Waymo and Zoox are currently working on robotaxis to replace your Uber. Meanwhile, traditional automakers already have the cars to sell you, and now they're working on the self-driving tech to put inside of them. But Tesla is kind of just doing everything. They're building the physical cars, they're making the self-driving tech, they're making the ride-hailing network, they're making the charging network, they're making robotaxis, they're making personally owned self-driving cars. They're doing literally everything. And that ecosystem is going to be Tesla's biggest advantage.
Okay, so you have these three different companies taking three very different approaches to creating a self-driving car, but what's the end result? What do these choices lead to? Well, it's basically just Apple versus Android, but for cars. Something that's really important to understand here is that these companies aren't just making individual cars that drive themselves. They're making generalizable platforms for autonomy, which means that if they can figure out a self-driving model, they can start licensing it out to every other car on the road. And that is obviously a massive market. So whoever gets to level 5 first could gain global market share, which is the race that they're all going after. Right now, the data is still preliminary because Tesla obviously has the safety monitors in every single robotaxi that can stop an accident right before it happens. But even with the preliminary numbers, Waymos appear multiple times less likely to be in an accident, which means that Waymo will probably win the race to licensing. Right now, they're talking to Toyota and Hyundai, but in the future, they could be talking to a bunch more automakers, which means that they could be in almost every new car that's built. This would essentially be the Android approach. And I mean, it makes sense. We're talking about Google here, right? Like they've already done this. They make a platform, they make it licensable, and then they license out to every other company that makes that product. So even though the Google Pixel isn't the #1 phone in the world, almost every phone runs Android, just like almost every car could use the Waymo driver. On the other hand, there isn't a lot of interest right now in companies licensing out Tesla's FSD, mostly due to safety and reliability concerns in poor weather conditions. But that might not really matter to Tesla. If they can perfect their stack, where they have their robotaxi and their own self-driving tech inside of it, and they can do it at a lower cost than everyone else by not using LiDAR, that might be all they need. This is essentially the Apple approach. They're not licensing out to anyone else, but by owning the full stack, they can make a higher efficiency, higher quality product than any of their competitors could. Even though I'm generally a believer in Tesla's approach of making their cars as smart as possible to reach level 5, they have a lot of work to do to reach Waymo's level of safety. But if they can get close, I think this is a pretty clear set industry where Waymo is going to license out to almost every other automaker, and Tesla will serve as the other option, just like Apple is the other option to Android. You may have noticed that I haven't mentioned Zoox or any other self-driving startup just now, and that's because once Waymo can perfect their stack, it makes no sense for Zoox to not just license it out. I mean, Zoox is building the hardware for a self-driving car, but what's the point of them building their own software anymore when Waymo could just step in and offer them the missing piece that they need to start operating their product? And all these other companies will just turn into the car equivalent of what smartphone OEMs are to Android, which is just a hardware device to host the Waymo driver.
All of these robotaxi companies have a different solution for getting to level 5 autonomy, and none of them are really there yet. I mean, one of them literally has a driver in the driver's seat. The other one drives like a Roomba, and the other one drives like an elevator. So clearly the race to level 5 autonomy is not over just yet. But honestly, I just hope that they all win, because after that Uber ride, I would take literally anything over that.